So Larry, welcome to our entrepreneurship session on global connections, and you met our multicultural group here in Miramichi, and you're very connected. So thanks for coming and giving a speech.
Sure. A couple of introductory comments, maybe just correct Kevin there. I'm a member of the Canadian Association of Professional Immigration Consultants. However, I actually operate my own immigration consulting and law practice, just Delong Immigration. Secondly, I've been watching the screen as all these PowerPoints, and I'm sitting here with a suit, so I kind of feel like I'm overdressed and under PowerPointed because I don't have a PowerPoint. And look, I really hope there's some international students on the line, because the topic I was asked to address is really immigration options for international students. And look, there are actually many, but before I get to that, and all students, I guess, but maybe in particular international students, your immigration journey begins when you accept your invitation to your Canadian university. That's really when your immigration journey begins. And if you will permit me to say it, you really have two jobs as a student. Two jobs. Number one, study hard and do well. And number two, you've got to build your personal and your professional networks. And I can't tell you how many times I've had students in my office over the last 7-8 years, gifted students, a lot smarter than I'll ever hope to be. However, they didn't take the opportunity to get off the campus, so to speak, and start to build some of those networks that are so very important, and are especially so very important in a place like New Brunswick. So if you just take those two little things into account, I think that will stand you in good stead. And then for the international students among us, don't leave your immigration decisions and your immigration journey to the last minute. Canada's immigration system works very well if you have a well-planned intent. Your application shows that. If your application shows that it's sort of an 11th hour Hail Mary, the immigration system sometimes is not very kind. So I would also suggest for those international students, along about, the start of year 4, the time is come for you to start thinking about what are your objectives in Canada, if you want to stay in Canada, what do you want to do and how do you get there? So with that, I guess I'll start. In Canada, immigration is what they call a concurrent jurisdiction, which means both the federal government, the government of Canada, and provincial governments have a sort of a constitutional role in the field of immigration. The other one, by the way, is agriculture. Practically speaking, however, it's only the government of Canada that can issue visas, whether they be permanent residence visas or whether it be temporary visas. It's only the government of Canada that can do that. In recent years, the provincial governments have been very active in developing what we call provincial nominee programs. And those have grown. They've grown substantially, but those programs are not able to issue visas. So I would really like to start with the federal government, if I could. IRCC, used to be CIC, it's now IRCC, Immigration, Refugees, Citizenship, Canada. And right off the top, when we're talking to international students, probably the most common path is, upon graduation or slightly before graduation, making your application for a postgraduate work permit. And that postgraduate work permit is going to allow you time, and that time is usually consistent with the length of your study program. It's also an open work permit, which means that you are able to seek out employment from any employer. However, I strongly suggest that seeking out employment that is consistent with your education is going to help you with your immigration applications further down the line. So that's my very first piece of advice, is your postgraduate work permit. My second piece of advice, and it's growing in popularity, is what we call express entry. Now, the express entry program is let me skip back a bit because I just made a mistake. Express entry is not an immigration program. The express entry system is merely a system whereby potential immigrant applicants can post their profile, which is really based on their age, language, work experience, education, and their adaptability to Canada. And a computer system will rank your profile and will put you in a pool, and the minimums in that pool changes, but essentially that's how you receive an invitation to apply for immigration to Canada. Now, there's 3 programs in the federal express entry system. And for students, one of the ones that you should keep your eye on is what we call the Canadian Experience Class, CEC. Remember, I mentioned your postgraduate work permit allowing you to go to work in an area that's consistent with your educational capabilities. Well, the Canadian Experience Class will allow you if you get an invitation to apply under that program, you need 1 year of Canadian work experience. So ideal for students who have graduated, been able to get 1 year work experience in Canada, and then they're in the pool, they're invited to apply, and then off they go and make their application to the federal government under the Canadian Experience Class. For those that watch these things, I know I do. Many of you probably don't stay up at night watching this stuff. But the last round of the Canadian Experience Class, the minimum score was 70 points. Those scores are usually up in the 200 and 300s. The minimum score was 70 points. So those applicants in the pool that had over 70 points, which is a pretty low bar, I guess is what I'm saying. All those applicants were invited to apply directly for permanent residence. The other two categories in the federal express entry, although maybe not as germane to students, are the federal skilled worker. And there could be a situation where a student had work experience in their prior country, significant work experience, came to Canada and took some education, and maybe qualified for a federal skilled worker. Not usual, it could be. The third category is a federal trades worker. So that express entry system has those 3 possibilities. Now, in the immigration world, COVID has had its effect as well. And COVID has sort of dampened the intake of immigrants into Canada during this COVID period. So what's that mean? You know, to some people, they would say, well, so what? We've had less immigrants during this period. So what? Well, if you look at this realistically, Canada's standard of living depends upon immigration. I'll just be, David Campbell talked about the success in New Brunswick with an increasing population over the last 4 or 5 years. 99, if not 100% of that growth in population has been immigrants. In New Brunswick, we're receiving 0 growth through natural increase. So with the lesser number of immigrants coming in over a sustained period, it really dampens our gross domestic product pursuits. The other thing I would say is that given that the immigration intake has been dampened a little bit, I suspect the government of Canada needs to make up those numbers. And I suspect one of the ways they're going to need to make up those numbers is lower some of those thresholds or those benchmarks under those 3 programs in the express entry pool. And it's really driven, quite frankly, by economic concerns. Because after all, the express entry system is an economic selection system. Okay, so back to students. We've talked about the postgraduate work permit. Are there other pathways for students to realize their immigration in Canada? And there sure are. See, this may sound a little bit strange to you, but I've had several cases where international students have come to New Brunswick. They've enrolled in a 4-year degree. They fell in love. They married, or they've lived common law for over a year period, legitimately so. And in that circumstance, that foreign national then is eligible sponsored to permanent residency by his or her Canadian citizen or permanent resident spouse or common law spouse. Doesn't happen often, but even in my practice, I've had 3 or 4 cases of a family class sponsorship involving sort of an international student. So there's another area. In the province, in the last 3 months, I've done a program called an owner-operator labor market impact assessment. And these 3 happen to be postgraduate students. They had happened to have some experience in their home countries and made some money. And they are in a position whereby they could actually invest in a business and become a senior manager. Well, there is a little known federal program that allows this to happen. And the person actually becomes a work permit initially, and then gets an invitation to directly apply for permanent residency. And 7-8 months down the road, they are a permanent resident. I wouldn't have thought it was possible, except I've seen 3 cases within the last few months here in New Brunswick of this very case. On the refugee side, or the humanitarian and compassionate side, I'll be honest, I've only had 1 case in my practice where an international student was graduating, and because of the situation in his homeland and the threat that he would face should he return, we were able to apply directly for a permanent residency under a refugee class. Startup visa. The startup visa is another rather unique tool of the government of Canada, whereby individuals who can show that they are investing in a business that has unique characteristics, or is new and unique, and it's pushing the envelope. Pending support from a designated organizations like venture capital firms and angel capital firms and some of our incubators, these individuals can actually apply to the startup visa program, gain support of the financiers that I just mentioned, and in so doing, they can pick up a work permit initially, and in very short order, then are able to apply again directly for their permanent residency. Again, in my practice, this has not been common, the startup visa, vis-a-vis students, but nonetheless, I've probably in the last 3 or 4 years probably done 10 of these, and I'm sure there are many more that are being done. So, just on the federal level, I've probably rhymed off maybe, 5 or 6 various pathways that might be available to students. But that's not all. the good news continues. At the provincial level, I mentioned the programs called the provincial nominee programs. And again, for graduating students who are able to acquire 1 year's work experience with an employer, and that employer is prepared to support them with an ongoing job offer, that student then, or that individual then could apply to the New Brunswick Skilled Worker Program, probably looking at a residency, pre-COVID times, probably looking at a residency sort of within 1 year. So they continue to work while they wait for their residency application. Each of the provinces, New Brunswick included, also has the ability to actually go into the federal express entry pool that I mentioned. And when individuals are putting their profiles forth for the federal express entry pool, they're asked to identify where they intend to live. So this allows provinces basically to go into the pool and examine the profiles of individuals who have expressed an interest in living in New Brunswick. Should the province, and I've had a couple of students actually qualified, should the province see a profile that they feel meets their qualifications, they can actually nominate that individual. It gives them an extra 600 points, by the way, on their wow. Express entry scoring. So it puts them wow. It puts them up in the 1,000 range. But nonetheless, the province can nominate them to a program we have in the province called the New Brunswick Express Entry Labor Market Program. So this would be applicable to individuals and students that had high language capability, advanced education, they had a job offer, maybe some work experience, had a job offer, foreign experience, and they could show some adaptability to Canada. It's quite possible that a student 1 or 2 years in could be selected by the province out of the federal pool and invited to apply right here in New Brunswick. Now, the bad news is the province of New Brunswick used to have, now since deceased, a postgraduate entrepreneurial pathway, whereby graduating students who perhaps didn't want to, whose wish was really to start their own business, could apply under this postgraduate entrepreneurial stream. They could start a business, and at the end of that year, they were able to show that they could pay themselves a salary, meet all their expenses, then they too were invited to apply for permanent residency. Unfortunately, that program does not exist in New Brunswick today, and I suspect only because the uptake probably was not what the province was looking for. I didn't do the research, but I'm pretty sure if I looked at Ontario and British Columbia that those entrepreneurial postgraduate stream would be available for students. Also in New Brunswick, I'll just mention, little known, we have a strategic initiatives program, and this is aimed at attracting francophone, French-speaking immigrants to New Brunswick. It is an economic program, so there is a scoring system, but a student that came to New Brunswick and studied in French and could meet the other qualifications may have a pathway through the Strategic Initiatives French-speaking program. So I don't know if anybody did the count on that, but just in this little 15, 20 minutes, we've probably identified, maybe 8, 9, 10 possible pathways for our international students to make their way toward permanent residency. I hope there's some questions, but I'm going to close. I'm going to say the exact same thing in closing that I did when I opened, and I hope the international students take this to heart, and all students. Number one, you have two jobs. Study hard, do well, make yourself proud, make your family proud. Number two, you've got to start immediately building those personal and professional networks. It can only help you. It's been said in New Brunswick, it's not just what you know, it's who you know.
Oh, yeah.
So if you believe me, you've got to start building those networks. It's possible to do. It may seem like a daunting task. If you can't do it, you call me and I'll help you do it. So that's my story and I'm sticking to it. I'm open for any praises, comments, criticisms that you may have.
Well, I tell you, that's a lot of opportunities for them. I never expected that many opportunities for them to come in, and let alone the internal opportunities. I mean, Aaron can talk about the Oasis and how the whole startup community. We're in Startup Miramichi today. There's Planet Hats. There's now Dockyard in Bathurst, and you're actually connecting to Bathurst already in the northerns. So you're not just connecting to Freddie, you're connecting to provincial.
No, one of my goals is to start trying to serve Francophone New Brunswick on two issues. Number one being business immigration, and number two being this whole skilled worker lack of labor situation. So I'm going to make a concerted effort to get up to Northern New Brunswick.
Yeah.
Je vous parle français à la personnes entreprises dans le nord de Nouveau-Brunswick. Now that's broken French. Doesn't matter. I'm going to say it.
So questions, students, especially international students, maybe the international students who wouldn't mind introducing yourself, and then would you mind doing that? Just a few, just to mention where you come from. I know most of you are in New Brunswick itself, but sometimes we have students from Brazil and they're not even here.
Sure.
Right. So does anybody want to take, just one of the leagues? Anyone?